Right, just let me know when you want me to begin the recording, Bob.
Yeah, I think. I can.
Would you like me to begin recording, sir?
Yes, please.
Very good.
Recording in progress.
This is the Master Plan Steering Committee meeting of May 30th, starting at 7 o'clock. And let's move on with our agenda, which was posted, I believe, last Thursday. First of all, the approval of the last set of minutes from the April 25th meeting. And I only have one comment, which Heather pointed out to me, and that was that BSC did not commit to go to the wellness meeting seminar of the COA, and so I did. So if you could just change those meeting minutes to reflect it.
Sure.
So do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as corrected?
I'm so moved.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor? Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, there's a bit of an echo, at least on my end. No, it stopped. Good. Where we were the last time, we were talking about what we needed to do to further publicize the survey. And I think the long and the short of it is that to a very large degree, Bolton is now surveyed out. I had conversations at town meeting. I had many conversations at the polls, which was actually a very effective place to have conversations about practically anything, because people were willing to spend a few minutes with you to talk about it, as opposed to the town meeting when they were simply trying to register and get in. And then we had obviously a reasonable group of people at Backyard Bolton at the town common. That was, I think, less crowded, less effective than it was the last time around. We talked to Eric about that, and he basically said he thought it was because of the time of the year, and probably early and later would be better. And I believe Brian is one scheduled, do you know, later?
I think it's probably going to be in August, but I don't think I've seen it. I don't think I've seen the dates for sure.
Okay. And the last bit was dealing with the COA and FOBs, and I was thinking seriously, and we discussed with Heather putting a insert into the Bolton Buzz, the COA periodical that comes out monthly. And I think at this point it'll simply be a little advertisement. The amount of time, effort, and cost associated with putting it in, considering the return on investment, and the fact that we have let people in the senior community know we have provided paper copies of the survey. And frankly, I did check last Friday, and none have appeared in the senior center and none have appeared at the town hall. So I think that's an indication that we probably ought to continue on with what we've got. I believe, Heather, you had mentioned you had 53 responses.
Yeah, I took a look, and I kind of parsed it out by the month to see if Backyard Bolton had any significant effect on the number of surveys we got. I think before then it was around 50, so there's really only 3 surveys that got added to that total. So I think, yeah, folks might be a little surveyed out. But I think from the general information and feedback that I see when looking at the survey results, it kind of tells us some information that we already anticipated, kind of already know, but also some newer trends, I guess. Shows us where people's interest lies. So I think, yeah, that's definitely something we could begin to wrap up and kind of move on from.
Yeah, I think we've tried everything we can.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think you're right.
You know, we've tried social media, 2 websites, lots of handouts around town, and 3 groups of people meeting together that we introduced this to, and that's about all we can do. So I would say that at this point we declare victory and continue on.
sounds good. And I can kind of send those results out to you guys as well when I compile them.
Yeah, that'd be very-
Off the
that'd be
top
very
of your
curious.
head, is there anything that you see that is significant and or different from what we've seen in the recent past couple of years?
I would say not entirely. I was surprised to see that when I asked how long folks lived in Bolton for, a majority of those that responded were between 0 to 4 years. So there was a good chunk of new residents that took the survey, which I think is good.
That's great.
Maybe we missed them the first time around. So it's a new group to include. You know, like 75% of folks said that they plan to stay in Bolton long-term or for retirement. And as far as which master plan topic was of most interest, it really varied, but for the most part, it was predominantly land use and open space and recreation, followed by economic development and then schools. So those are the leading topics. Otherwise, I would say it remains on trend with what we saw in the past, but I'm sure other things might jump out to you guys as you look through the results, so I can send those over to you.
Okay, that would be good. I'd be interested in seeing that in aggregate.
Yeah.
Okay, anything more on publicizing? Not at this point, the survey. I think the website's doing its job. People go to it. We did have some problems with the QR code, mostly for mobile devices. I don't think it was a problem elsewhere, but mine did not recognize it, although it did recognize the posters that we had for some reason. Not sure what the problem was there. Did other people try it and experience that? Okay, well, I guess I'm one off.
Sometimes they're funky.
But isn't the QR code mainly for mobile devices? Or am I
Yeah,
back in the dark ages?
it's kind of hard to hold your laptop up to look at it,
Yeah, exactly.
but apparently it's selective and it depends on the QR code reader. I mean, there are a fair number of them, but mine I need to change out.
I've seen it get a little wonky with tablet PCs, but really it's kind of hit and miss pretty much with every QR code in my experience.
Okay, well, since I've been warned, I'll go get another QR code reader app and see if it works better. Okay, enough of that. I guess the next thing, and critically important, we need to move on. And I am very interested in the perspective of VSC on what the next steps are. And we're very excited to hear the possibility of seeing at least some initial draft information, because I think that's where we need to get into it.
Yep. So Olivia has done a great job of pulling together, excuse me, a document that is about 45 pages long right now with existing conditions for each of the different elements of the master plan. And I have been kind of going through it and proofreading it, and I was not comfortable sending it out until I had finished that. So I am a fair amount of the way through. I'm not fully all the way through with it. And at the time that that's done, we can send that along. It should be within the next week or so.
Does that
After
cover
that-
every aspect of every level of the master plan? Or just
That-
specific ones?
That covers the existing conditions for every one of the elements that are going to be in the master plan. So each chapter that's written will have a little bit of a description of how the town exists today. And the statistics and that data and the sourcing that we have that comes with that will all be in there.
Okay.
Okay, so you'll send that out in the next week or so, and that'll be
Yes.
interesting. But I think to a very large degree, we've seen an awful lot of that already in piecemeal, not in a 45-page narrative. But at this point, I'm particularly interested in focusing on what we've gotten out of the original forum and the surveys, and where we need to be focused in terms of objectives at a higher level. I think we know some of those already, but individual objectives associated with each of the elements, understanding that there are a number of cross-element objectives and vice versa. But how do you propose we work with that, and what do you see as the next step in public engagement? I
Right.
think people are looking for results. I certainly.
Yep, no, so we have gone through and pulled out, as you'll recall, the goals of various different plans from the
Right.
past. What we would like to do is combine some of that existing information that's out there with some of those goals and look at a public engagement event in person around a number, like say we piece out land use, zoning, and transportation, and kind of have a working open house type of event where we invite people to come and be able to provide input that way. I do think that we have seen that a lot more people are more interested in the in-person component of things now, that
Oh, yes.
COVID's kind of behind us. So we are, I think if we have a series of events with the different elements and kind of group them together in ways that make sense, that'll give us the direction we need moving forward to further refine the goals and objectives and the actions of the master plan.
How do you see that kind of event encouraging dialogue? I mean, we've had a lot of show and tell, and we've had sort of one way people's perspective on different elements of it, but is there a way that we can have conversations as opposed to us presenting findings and people providing input on those findings?
Well, the other option we can do is have small group facilitated discussions where we have general questions and we allow groups of people to really just sit down and kind of talk them over. And then we can report back after that. We've done public engagement that way as well. So it's more of the, there isn't a huge presentation that's provided or anything like that. It's just kind of a quick, we're here for this reason. Here's what we're looking for. Here's some information for you that is at the tables. And we have these questions and get people's priorities that way. And you get their input that way in the smaller groups. Some of that is a little challenging sometimes if you have strong personalities at a table and others aren't able to really provide their input. So there's pros and cons to the different approaches. And I don't know if you've done things a certain way and found that they've been successful in the past, that you would lean toward one way or another. But I mean, there are different strategies we can use to try to get people in a room and then kind of giving us their input.
I guess my experience has been, first of all, you need thoughtful and strong facilitators, coordinators, moderators, as it were. And you can't do that with a large number of individual little fora, individual working groups. It needs to be a few, like 3. And then you need to have people who are able to facilitate conversation, much as you would if you're teaching, asking a class about something and drawing people out. the old, well, so what do you think? What do you think about what he or she just said? Do you see it as important, et cetera? Which is reasonably easy to do, just as long as you get the right people to ask those questions, moderate it, and be able to distribute the conversation around the room or table or whatever.
Very Socratic.
You have to, but you also have to have the people who are willing to be able to speak in front of other people too. And some people are not as comfortable with that. So we have to be mindful of, if you have kind of an open house format where people can walk around and they can kind of give their input and interact as needed versus having to kind of speak up over people where they may not be comfortable, then that's not going to facilitate positive discussion either. So I think we can try to do a balance of both, maybe try one out and see how it works. And if it doesn't work the way we want it to, we can switch gears. But I do think that there are, it depends on the community and who turns out and what they want to say.
When would you be doing this?
I think that we can try to have something over the summer, being mindful that the summer is tough to get feedback that way, but you know, September is always a good coming back from vacations and, you know, schools starting and people are starting to fall into a routine where they know their schedules a little bit better. We could also try something over Zoom if you're interested in doing it that way instead of in person. I tend to find that people are kind of zoomed out, so people don't really want to do Zoom that way. But I think if there is a reason to draw people in and there's something for them out of it, they're more likely to turn up than not.
I guess, you know, just looking back on the way we put public input and conversation together in the town common, one of the key elements of that was identifying key people in the various stakeholder constituencies who would be interested in a particular element of the plan and having them come together and getting the right people with personal invitations to form what amounts to a charrette with the right people. And then you can get people who are willing to speak up if you select them reasonably well, and speak for a constituency or a stakeholder group, rather than having people who just kind of come because they're interested, but don't necessarily represent anybody but, you know, their particular interests. It was a lot of work, as Ken can attest. We had to go through what the various constituents were as we provided you with that list, and then whittle it down to a reasonable number, and then actually go out and talk to the people who we believe would be the best representatives, or ask for a referral to who they felt would be a better representative. And gee, we got a lot of discussion, and people were very willing to have the conversation. But again, it was, I guess, we had 35 people in those conversations, and it went on, you know, frankly, for a whole day. But there was, people thought a lot about it before they walked in the door, about what they felt was important, what was important to their constituency, to their stakeholder group, and were able to speak pretty intelligently for them, and were pretty level-headed about the conversation. There weren't any shouting. Well, there were a minimal number of shouting matches. Brian?
Yeah, thanks. I promise I have a question in here, but I feel like I need to explain a little bit about where I'm coming from with this question. So when I think about why we would seek public input, I feel like there's a few different reasons. Sometimes you seek public input because you want to be able to say in the future, oh, we talked to people about this and we heard from them, and what's in the plan reflects either majority opinion or consensus, or shows that there's some level of public support for whatever is in the plan. But then other times you seek public input because you're still in sort of an exploratory brainstorming phase, and you want to take advantage of sort of the collective wisdom of a bigger group. And I think I'm just not quite clear about what our goal in getting public input would be. Or I guess what I'm saying is there could be multiple things that we're trying to get public input about. I think we need to be clear, like, well, let me give you an example. I think it's easier to get somebody to a forum that's talking about the high school building project or the town common, because it's like a very specific thing where they can be educated and then people can ask their questions. But with a master plan, if we're not sort of focusing people in on a couple key questions, then I think you risk not being able to pull people in. So what, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I feel like we need to be very clear on why people would even be enticed to come in the first place. And I think the way to do that is to be very specific about what we're hoping to get from them out of the event.
One
Yeah,
thing,
I would-
sorry, Bob, one thing that Bob did during those original ones was everyone was contacted personally and it was explained to them what they were looking for. Because people are not going to come unless you personally invite them. Simple as that. They're just not going to show up. People have lost an interest in going to sort of general meetings. They have to be personally invited and make a commitment to come.
But Brian, to your point, we were looking, I think, more at the second approach than the first. You know, I think we felt that we, as a result of a survey, a very extensive survey, we had a very significant amount of input, and the survey really did provide, you know, a broad range of perspectives. It did focus in on things, but what we wanted was the interaction and the brainstorming. A lot of things came out in those conversations that didn't come out in the surveys, and innovative approaches to doing what was perhaps reflected in the surveys. You know, people started bouncing things off each other and some
So-
things we had never thought of.
That's really helpful, Bob. And I guess so then my follow-up question would be, do we think there's gonna be, 2 or 3 specific questions that we want people to engage on? So and I apologize if this has already been decided and I just missed it, but one thing that keeps coming up for me where I would love to hear people's thoughts on are like, what does it look like nowadays to try to engage the public in deliberation? Because I feel like we're all struggling with maybe lack of enthusiasm or dwindling participation, and maybe that's just because the methods aren't keeping pace with folks' lifestyles. But I would like to call people in and just hear from them, like, how would you like to be able to participate? What are the things that you want? And so I don't know if like public participation in town decision making is a topic that we could explore, or if there are other ones that you had in mind.
Well, I personally think that's a very important topic. Right now, you know, the criticism all over the place is a very small number of people run the town. Well, we've got to change that, because those small number of people, frankly, are running the town to some degree without being informed. And then people react. So we have decision making followed by Facebook criticism, as opposed to a better way of doing business. So, you know, that's well said. I think that would be a very good conversation. And it's been a conversation that has occurred with communication with town government, public-private collaboration, town meeting, lots of things. And I think it'd be very nice to have some brainstorming about, first of all, why aren't you involved? And I'm sure we'll hear the usual range of answers. You know, some people aren't like Stasha, they actually do 2 things at once. But I think there is a lot of that. I got a lot of other things to do. Well, how do we have a conversation about the relative importance of what's going on here, as opposed not to diminish what you're doing, but what you're doing, and have a conversation about how to do that. But that'd be a great topic. Our able consultants, what do you think?
I think that that is something that should be looked at, particularly related to the, the town facilities and town governance and all of that. That's in the sections there. I do think that if we're able to identify a few other questions that way, then having this, the facilitated group discussions would be much more beneficial. I think when we get to the point where there are goals that are part of an implementation plan that comes out of the master plan, that's where having kind of an open forum in a way for people to come and really provide their feedback on those goals and objectives and actions and kind of the timeline and phasing, what's more of a priority than what isn't, then that would be a different way to look at it, but that's a little bit farther out once kind of all of the stuff has been hashed out. So you present a draft of these kinds of, the draft of the implementation matrix, and you see how people react to that. But I also do want to caution that people who have not been involved, that don't know a whole lot of what a master plan is about, and I know that you've done a lot to kind of saturate the town in terms of familiarity and making people comfortable with it and kind of an approach, but I think that's where having backup information available for people would be helpful at that point. And that's not to say that we can't just pull from what we've already been doing over the last several months in terms of that information gathering as well, and like displaying that data. So I do think there's a couple of different tracks. Bob, I know that you have been very focused on the kind of the rural by nature type of design and that kind of a thing. And I don't know if that's something that lends itself to having one of these public engagement efforts around as well, in terms of not just for like targeted master plan group, but like for other groups that would be interested in attending as well. So I don't want to jump to like the next topic, but I think that needs to be factored into whatever series of events we're looking at in terms of timing and what we're looking for people to come to the table with.
Other thoughts?
Are we trying to reach more groups? Is that our goal? Reach out, get more feedback from residents?
A broader cross-section, I would say.
Yeah, but again, I think we've gotten a lot of input, and I think it's to some degree either informed or uninformed input, but we haven't had the creative thinking that bounces ideas off each other to come up with some sort of reasonable approach to solve the problems and, create a roadmap for the future. When it gets into communication, we've all complained about, town meeting is at the wrong time and we have babysitter problems and gee, how do we communicate realistically a way of getting basic approaches and decisions from the various town boards, and how do we get people to know more about the town staff than they do now? Unless they're applying for a permit or dealing with problems with conservation or whatever, they tend not to know a whole lot, very little, frankly, about town government. Well, how do you resolve that? And I'd love to come out of that, a conversation about that with some, creative ideas that may or may not have been used, and ways to solve that problem with specific activities. I hate to go straight to an implementation matrix, but it sure would be nice to come out of a conversation about town communication, resident town government communication, resident forums, and that kind of thing, and have some specific things that we can do that apparently we have not done, that we ought to do.
I keep thinking about, is it town groups that we're trying to get into to find people, to educate them?
Yeah, I think that's
Where are
true.
they hiding? Where are the people hiding? All right.
But how do you engage them? and I honestly have no idea at this point. I mean, we've tried lots of things. And we've tried media in every way. We've tried making presentations. We've tried the forum. We've had people provide information at the forum in small group stations. But somehow or other, I think we need to solve the bigger problem. And it's not just a master plan problem. It's a town problem. It's a community problem. Now, how do we engage the community and have better communication?
Do we know what the impact so far on Bolton has been of the high school forums? I have not participated or watched or done anything, but does the public care about that?
Well, I care about the price tag.
Right.
That's true, but
I don't
and I
think,
guess
yeah, there hasn't been, again, I'm talking as someone who spends zero time on Facebook.
Right.
And I understand there has been a fair amount of discussion and relatively little attendance at the Zoom presentations.
Yeah.
That the school building committee has put together.
I guess what I was thinking about when several of you have been talking were to try to find things that were of interest or that would be in effect headline grabbing to have at a forum or at a meeting of some sort. And I don't know if those would be our views of the high priorities or whatever from the implementation matrix, but to get people to come. So as an example, and I don't know whether you would get as specific as saying, create a senior center, but you could have that as one, and that's going to generate certainly interest amongst that segment of the population, and it might do some other ones. Or you could take a view on that a little more broadly and say we need a community center, which could gravitate into the whole notion of needing more community, which is what the forums can maybe help with. But I'm just thinking that if there were some specific projects or potential projects or whatever, not unlike the common, that we wanted input on, that and while they were there, we introduced them to the other elements of the plan or how it fit into the plan, then you may be able to get an audience and you may be able to get some input into that's actually helpful into some of those projects and maybe the larger thing.
Okay.
No, that's a good point. We haven't had a lot of traction, as Mary can understands, about the senior center, but I think, with the opportunities that, and we certainly don't want to get into a detailed discussion about the relationship between the town and the Scouts, that has an opportunity for community there. A discussion which has not occurred, to the best of my knowledge, about a community center. That's point well taken. So,
Right.
Community communication and a community center are two, I think, very important elements that will inform where the master plan goes, if it's going to be successful.
I do think there has been some discussions in different areas about community centers in general, not specifically senior centers. And I, for one, have been telling my seniors that, if you want a center for yourselves that you share, that will work as a community center, but you're not going to get, I don't believe you're going to get a senior center, but a community center where you could spread the wealth in the whole town. You'll get the votes, you'll get the people who are invested in doing that. But there have been discussions, it's just they're not very specific.
But but to build on that, and include the Scout part of the thing in the thing, to have a meeting that discussed that of a community center or something,
Mhm.
I would think would draw more people than say, well, we're going to have an overview of all of the elements of a master plan. Because they can understand, whether they agree with it or not, they can understand the effect that a community center would have on the town financially and otherwise, and what it might mean to the community, and that might generate some interest. And then we could build on that into the prioritization part of the master plan. I don't know.
But I think one of the things you have to do is what Bob did with the common, was to invite specific stakeholders who then spread their information to their base. And then their enthusiasm by going and discussing it will pass down to the people they know. I think if you just say to the community, oh, come talk to us about a community center, you're not going to get much of a turnout. But I think if you work at finding, people who will talk to people, then you'll
It needs
get
to
a
be,
decent turnout.
yeah,
I agree.
I agree with Penny. Doing something that's a bit more grassroots and organic tends to track better.
I think
I'm
we
not,
also.
I'm not saying don't be I'm not saying don't be grassroots in the organizing. I'm talking about what you're publicizing that you're going to talk about.
I think it's better to reach out and be evangelists. If we can't
Okay.
get people to meetings, we go see them. Okay, we go to scouts.
I agree. I agree.
We go to
And that's
PT.
what we did.
Do we need more?
Well,
Right.
we had call lists and we talked to people, but it wasn't just inviting them. It was having an elevator speech,
Right.
how important it was to the particular constituency that they represented, or we thought they represented.
I agree. I
But
agree.
it was all about broadening the constituency in order to pass the bill.
So what's the success? Where are we in a sense? Having done that, or have we done enough?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Then it seems like we have to be evangelists and reach out, I guess, to get more people like Penny's talking about. Sort of plans.
I think it's, I
Whether they'll
think,
come back to a meeting or not, I don't know.
but to Brian's point, I guess everybody's thinking this way. We need to come up with specific areas of interest, a limited number of specific areas of interest, certainly in the beginning, rather than talking about the big master plan picture
Mhm.
that says that the master plan has identified these as critical areas of interest and concern and will inform our success. Let's have a conversation about them and bring the right constituencies, plural, very plural if possible, to
Mhm.
have that conversation. So if we're talking about a community center, and part of that is learning a little bit about communication in order to get people to get into the conversation and get the right people to get into the conversation about community center and build the constituency. Not that we're trying to, move the implementation plan forward so much as to get people interested in an element of the implementation plan. But I think going back to the two issues that we've discussed here, one is townwide communication and how do we improve that, and why, and then part and parcel of that is a community center.
Agreed.
And that's kind of, to some degree, actually very distinct degree, what happened with the common. We had a big survey, and by the way, the survey was not about the common. The survey is about, what do you want to do with this big piece of land in the middle of Bolton?
Mhm.
And a lot of feedback came back. And a lot of it was, well, we'd like a common. And, that was nice. It made us rethink some of our strategy dramatically in some cases, since we were in receipt of a mass development loan for development. We had to kind of explain to those guys that we're actually a common is an important piece of development of a town like ours. And so we were able to move forward on that. But with this in mind, can we think about specific next steps in order to do this? Can we have I don't know which comes first, communication or a community center? I personally think we can learn a lot about communication by communicating, figuring out how to determine what the constituencies are and go talk to people.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think if you get a group of 30 people in town, we all know them, who know everybody, and say, we need you to call 4 or 5 people and say why they should come to this meeting. I think we're really good about sending out emails and putting all the information on the town website and all this, but there's nothing personal about it. Why should anybody bother? And they may read the information, but they don't react unless it personally hits them, like Brian's tax breakdown, and that they paid attention to. But I think you've got to somehow personalize it.
This just occurred to me while we were talking this through. In terms of timing, I'm wondering if we may want to aim for early October, because the special town meeting dealing with the high school is going to be
In September.
middle to late September. So depending on how that goes, there may actually be a lot of energy around community planning. Like there's probably going to be some people that are really happy with the way the vote goes and some people that are really unhappy. So it might be a good thing to have it shortly after that instead of trying to do it before it, because we'd be competing against a lot of other priorities.
Very good
Yeah.
idea. We could probably piggyback or capture some of that energy or be a recipient of that runoff of that energy, I think. Yeah, I agree.
If we do it in the summer, we'd have to do it on the Cape.
This is true. There's no one here in the summer.
Right.
I mean, I guess I could suck it up and go. I don't know.
But, in terms of planning for that, I believe we need a couple of things. First of all, we need some way to inform people of the importance of the particular thing we're going to talk about. And secondly, we need to identify the people with whom we want to talk in order to bring them into a forum to have the conversation. So we need a couple of topics. I think Brian made a very good point. We're going to have some excited people, one way or the other, after the school vote.
Mhm.
And we need to identify the people that we can get in. And then on top of
Reality
that,
is, Bob, with all the people we have sitting here, there are enough people between all of us that we can make a list. Each of us make a list of who, say there are 20 people we know who might be willing to talk to other people. I mean, some of it's obviously gonna cross over, but that would start your list. If everybody here put together a list of 20 people that they think would be willing to be involved. And the topics, you got to narrow down to 2 or 3. The community center is one maybe, and what the other ones are, I don't know.
Agreed.
well, I think.
Can I
well, I think
ask a question? Oh.
Stasha.
So I have 2 topics, I think. As I'm listening to everybody, it seems like housing and open space might go together as one topic. A subtopic or a question, a searching question of that forum would be something like, how are we going to moderate growth in our town? And then the solutions or the options there would be things like, we keep the status quo, we have cottage housing, we zone for some kind of open space residential design, we meet our 40B requirements, or that was already in the last one, but something like that, where you've got these subcategories and then you've got pros and cons of each of those. And that's kind of like the flow of information. Discuss, like that would be one. And then the second topic, where you said the community center, if we're trying to get the most bang for our buck out of these meetings, maybe it's also other parks and recs topics, which I admittedly am not as attached to right now in terms of the details there, but things like, you know, the town services or, you know, town fields, you know, Ed, feel free to jump in. But
Okay.
certainly a community center as part of that. And then the subtopics or the problems or topics to be discussed would be things like, what do we need? Okay. Or what do we want? Where, who's in charge of it? What's our wish list? What's our types of programming? And that in and of itself could be a whole nother forum, but they're two very different types of forums with different topics. So I feel like those are easy to separate because you might get interested people in one that are interested in one and not the other. That's just wanted to put that out there.
Oh, that's a good point. Oh, that's a good point.
I think that we, sure, this is a great, tactic, and I think from the beginning, sorry, it's echoing, I don't know, it's echoing.
There's
Oh,
an
that's
echo.
probably me. Hold on. I've got a car. It's me.
I think from the beginning, we've had the list of stakeholders, and that's a really great resource. So maybe if, you know, we find a middle ground, or we have so much intermediary time before October, September, or whenever this happens, that maybe in the meantime, we think about these questions that are more of overarching questions, but can help facilitate discussion and kind of get to the meat of the master plan and what we're trying to achieve. And through identifying those questions, and maybe it would be helpful to narrow down some stakeholders that you know are really knowledgeable about these items and invested in the community and can bring their knowledge to the table, and also converse with people who have strong interests in the town. And I think that would be a good way to facilitate discussion. And that could be like 10 people, it could be 20 people, depending on how much space, but something that could kind of get that conversation going and maybe help us narrow down a little bit where those interests are. Just an idea.
Yeah, I think we have to have a topic that's a draw. It has to be something really interesting. I don't know that we can just say, come to a great meeting about communications. I think there ought to be something very tangible. The new playground, because we lost all our playgrounds. We need a new playground.
Yeah.
Pickleball, come and have pickleball. And by the way, let's talk about how we're going to do all these things, kind of working into it. But I sense that it needs to have some kind of a personal draw to get people interested. Because, you know, as you say, Penny, we know a lot of people, and there's, you know, many intelligent people. Why aren't they there? Why aren't they there with us? What haven't we done to reach out to them? So yeah, friends call friends, and get something to draw them in. And obviously a community center is key to so many aspects of, having these rewards in the community. And it just isn't there. So what can we do to achieve that?
You know, one thing that occurs to me talking about community centers, I think the view of a lot of people of a community center may be not broad enough. That a community center is not just a building that has a bunch of rooms in it, a cafeteria or a kitchen, that people come to of, you know, various age demographics and interests. It can be, you know, a community area of a couple of 100 acres with that has, oh, by the way, a building, maybe swimming pool, maybe a number of other things, but also a lot of outside activities. So that it becomes a much broader definition of community center.
You bet. You bet.
Okay,
Yeah.
so where do we go from here?
Okay.
We,
What's
I
the
think
timing?
everybody's got to make their list,
well, we got to have our topics too.
but you don't have to start with your topics. You can just start with your list of people who you think that would talk to other people.
Yeah, but I think
you
you
could
do
have your
need to,
topics.
I think you do need a list of topics though.
Yeah.
And I think one way to get it is to have everybody at this meeting, or everybody who isn't here that's also a member, create a list of 5, 10, whatever the number would be of things, and compile all those together. Either provide those to Heather and Olivia or to one of us to consolidate it all together and list them out. I mean, it would be a mini survey in a way. And at the same time, yes, have them identify the people. But I guess where I was trying to go earlier in all of this was what we were saying about needing to have some specific things to go after, some headline grabbers. And so we ought to be in a position to say what some of those are.
Right.
So one thing we could do to as a next step, and sorry, remind me again when we're gonna get the draft. Was that a couple weeks?
It's a draft of the existing conditions
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So could you remind me again when we're
in the next
expecting-
couple weeks.
Okay, because I was just thinking that might also spark some people's thoughts, but what I can easily do is I can create a very simple like Google survey if in advance of our next meeting, people want to send me their ideas and we can just vote on them. So I can take
So
charge.
we
of that.
sending you topics, Brian?
Yeah, I'll send an email to everyone specifying what I need and then I'll do the rest.
Okay. And at the same time, we still haven't, to the best of my knowledge, updated the list of constituencies, stakeholder groups with specific people that we would contact in order to proselytize for this whole business. So who has the most current version of that? I may actually, and I think I've shared it with
I may
Olivia.
have one, but I don't know how updated it is.
And we have a little bit more time for that if this isn't going to be until this early fall.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So how many topics are we sent, just to make clear, Brian, tell us exactly what you want us to send you.
I'm going to ask everybody on this.
Put it in an email.
I'm going to ask,
Okay.
yeah, and I'll put this in an email, but I'm going to ask everybody on the steering committee to send me their 3 best ideas.
Okay.
For a topic for a forum.
Okay.
Okay.
And I will go back and look at the most current list of constituent or stakeholder representatives and determine, I think it's a matter of talking to those people individually to find out if they still believe that they're the right person. And if not, who is. So we've got to track all that down.
But, and Bob, who wants to talk to them? If you're gonna send out the list to everybody, you might ask who wants to sign up to talk to them at the same time.
Okay, yeah,
Kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
yep.
Okay.
Okay, that's about what I have. I did say in a series of email thread that we do need to talk about an approach to dealing with the offers that have been made with regard to the Boy Scout camp. And how to put a group together to thoughtfully pursue that with.
Have you shared that with everybody? The thoughts?
I did.
Yeah, he did.
Okay,
It was a response to Ed's information that was sent
okay.
to the board.
Yeah.
Steering committee.
Yeah, and I discussed that with Don Lowe today as well.
Good.
Last but not least, I did send out the application that we made to the EDA for a forum and review of our planning documents by Randall Arendt. And Don Lowe graciously agreed to have the town do the cost sharing in this. So I think it'll go well.
Yes, yes. I'm actually quite excited about that talk, to be honest.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. Stasha, you must be happy about this. You've been my prime pusher. Or anyway.
Well, it's all about education, right? Like this is prime time for getting people educated and up to speed with where I feel I've been swimming for a while now.
Yeah, and what can happen. And what can. Yeah, okay. Anything else? If not, we have 2 action items. One to get information to Brian, the best 3, and then put together the list of constituent and stakeholder representatives. And I will pursue that. I'm actually getting used to doing that. I seem to update it every 2 years. Okay, thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
See ya.
Night.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Have a good day. Sure. Night.
We didn't need a motion to adjourn there.
Also, we didn't need to decide on the meeting, so we'll have to decide that some other time.
Yeah, I'll send out an email on that.
We'll coordinate that by email. Yeah. Take care, everyone. Have a good night. Eh?
Way to read that in the minutes.
I'll send